Good morning. The first item of business on the agenda this morning is the approval of the minutes from the September 8th, 2017 meeting. I move to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. There was a correction that we previously made to the minutes. The word unanimously in the first sentence has been removed. With that out of the way, good morning and welcome to the September 14th, 2017 public meeting of the New York City Campaign Finance Board. With Tuesday's primary elections behind us, we are gearing up for the general election in November. Public funds payments to qualifying candidates for those elections will be coming in a few weeks. The next milestone for the CFB will be disclosure filings due from candidates by Friday, September 22. Today we'll be voting on enforcement matters from elections held in 2013, 15, and 16. I turn now to CFB Executive Director Amy Loprest for her report.
I just have a brief report. Tomorrow I will be traveling to Philadelphia to speak to the Philadelphia Board of Ethics about pending legislation before the Philadelphia City Council to implement a public matching funds program similar to the one in New York City. So they would be governed by the Philadelphia Board of Ethics, and I'm going to speak to their board to discuss the implementation of such a program.
Very good. Thank you. We have candidate appearances of three candidates this morning. The first is Joseph Borelli. Mr. Borelli, would you have a seat over here with your representative, if any, and with the staff of the CFB have a seat at this table? Mr. Borelli, the way we proceed is the staff of the CFB will make a short presentation of the issue and their position, and then I will turn to you for whatever comments you wish to make.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, if I could just correct, I'm the treasurer, David Carr. Unfortunately, Councilmember Borelli couldn't be with us this morning.
Very well. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Schaefer, Executive Director Loprest, members of the board. My name's Cameron Ferrante. I'm Associate Counsel for the Campaign Finance Board, and with me today is Joel Babb, who's the CFB Auditor. Before the board is the matter of the Joseph Borelli campaign in the 2015 special election for City Council District 51. The candidate was a participant in the program but received no public funds. CFB staff recommends the board find that the campaign committed the following violations of the Act and board rules and assess penalties according to the penalty guidelines: failing to timely return over the limit doing business contributions, accepting contributions from corporations, limited liability companies, or partnerships, accepting a contribution from an unregistered political committee. The campaign contests the recommended violations and penalties.
Thank you. Mr. Carr.
If I could turn it over to Mr. Lantry, our lawyer from the committee.
That's fine. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board. My name is Brendan Lantry. I'm here representing the Borelli for City Council Committee from 2015. I just wanted to give you a little overview of where the campaign was in 2015 and exactly what happened here. The campaign does not contest, as Enforcement Counsel has stated, does not contest the second two violations. The violation that we do contest is the failing to timely return over the limit doing business contributions. Back in 2015, in early 2015, I believe it was May, former Councilman Vincent Ignizio from the 51st Council District announced that he was going to resign until the special election was called and the vacancy was actually put in. The vacancy became effective. The Borelli for Council campaign could not open up a special election committee, so they opened up a 2017 committee. At that stage, they received a number of contributions, some of them doing business contributions. The limit at that time was $250. They received those. Once the special election was announced, the campaign was notified that they had to that the doing business limit was reduced from $250 to $125. The campaign, within the time period allotted, did refund $125 of the $250 to a number of contributors. I believe it was 11. However, there was some confusion on the campaign's part because the notice said to provide either a bank check or a certified check, and the campaign was under the impression that a bank check meant the committee check. So the campaign wrote out checks to each of those individuals. The campaign was then notified that they needed to actually go to the bank and get a bank check, and they promptly did so. The refunds were 3 days late, and so I just wanted to also note that the councilman did not have an opponent in that race. There were no matching funds used in that race. If the current law was in place, it's our belief that the candidate would not have been a program participant at that time, in which case these fines wouldn't have been assessed. So the campaign is respectfully requesting either no fine or a de minimis fine for these violations.
Thank you. Anything further from CFP staff?
I'd just say that Mr. Lantry represented that the campaign made the refunds within the time allotted, but the fact that the campaign was still in possession of the refund checks as of 10:45 p.m. on the day that the refunds were due indicates that they hadn't actually made the refunds at that time. And the fact that they later certified those checks on the 29th, which was 3 days after the refund was due, indicates that they did not make the refunds within the time allotted.
I don't think there's any factual dispute here that the refund, because of this mix-up, was made 3 days late. I think the argument is that this is a pretty heavy penalty for a small violation.
I mean, isn't it fair to say that this is an unusual situation? It's really, I'm looking at this as one mistake in effect, because it's one batch with the same mistake at the same time, as opposed to a series of refunds over a period of time. Would it be fair to look at this as really one mistake?
Well, you could look at it as one mistake, but it would be one mistake which incurred 10 violations of the rules, which clearly state that refunds need to be made within the 20-day period and by bank or certified check.
3 days late because of this reason, though. Is that correct? I mean, they would have been on time if they had been able to use the non-certified check.
Well, no, because if they'd used the
No. If it had been permissible to use a non-certified check, they would have been on time.
If the rules and the law were different, it could have been in compliance with.
No, I understand, but I'm saying as a factual matter, and the only reason for the 3 days over was because of the need to get these checks certified.
I suppose
it's a fact matter.
I mean, yes, the reason the checks were issued 3 days late was because they were not issued properly until 3 days after the due date. Yeah.
I think we've got your point that there was a violation here, and I think we've got your point that it was inadvertent and somewhat smaller in seriousness than the amount of the penalty. Are there other questions or comments by members of the
I do have one clarification question.
Yeah.
So, so you brought up the 10:38 p.m. time, and are you saying that on the 20th day that they still had possession of the checks at 10:38 p.m. so that in other words they would have, if they were they actually postmarked on the 20th day, or were they actually postmarked the day after?
I don't have evidence of when they were postmarked or if they were ever mailed. All I know is that the proof of the checks being written was sent to the CFB at like 10:47 p.m. on the day that the response was due.
Thank you.
It seems odd that all 10 checks cleared 3 days later. I mean, so they
didn't clear; they were certified.
They were certified.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the point is the money was still in the account when the time expired. It was out of the account 3 days later because of the certification.
Correct, because we were made aware of the issue. We promptly, within 3 days, certified them. And just to note the time, I think that's probably when, or the day, we sent a copy of the committee checks that day, which was the day to respond. So I think that's probably the time in which the email was sent. That's my belief.
Okay, thank you very much. The next candidate scheduled for appearance is Julio Pabon. So, as not to repeat my prior mistake, you are Mr. Pabon?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Welcome. CFB staff will make a short statement, and then I'll indicate that the floor belongs to you.
Good morning, Chair Schaefer, members of the board, Executive Director Loprest, and Mr. Pabon. My name is Joseph Gallagher, Associate Counsel for the CFB. Before the board this morning is the matter of Julio Pabon campaign in the 2016A special election for City Council District 17. The campaign was a participant in the program and did receive public funds. CFB staff recommends that the board find the campaign has a public funds repayment obligation of the campaign's final bank balance, and the campaign does not contest this recommendation.
Mr. Pabon?
Yes, well, good morning, and I definitely agree. I don't contest the recommendation, but I thought I should be here and just give some of my ideas of some of the things that occurred in both the 2013 campaign and 2016 campaign, because I think it will help many of the candidates and the board in understanding at the ground what really goes on. And I apologize for not doing this in 2013 after 2013, but it was a matter of so many things happening that we needed to take some breaks and then do it after 2016. So finally, I decided to do it now, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so. First of all, I want to thank the Campaign Finance Board as a whole, because I think that the concept and the fact that it's even being interested in other cities, I think is a testament to the fact of what has been started here in New York City, which is it gives people like myself that had not been involved, never been involved in a campaign, belongs to no political organization, no political club, have absolutely no interest in running for any office, except that after a while of living for almost 60 years in the same community and seeing things not changing, you finally put your hands up and say, you know, we should try and do something about this. And the fact that you have a campaign finance board that allows people like myself at that time that had no support to be able to actually get involved in campaign, that's commendable. However, there's two sides of that. It's like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And one part of it is the fact that you have an incredible staff here that really tries to help the staff, like myself, who had no experience. We came to a training. We learned a lot about what are the mechanisms of trying to get campaign financing, because the bottom line is if you don't have money, you can't run in New York City, especially in places like the South Bronx that are still run like third world plantations. And the fact is that helped us a lot, that we were able to at least get the understanding that we could get some possible campaigns. And we finally did. But in the process of doing that, there's certain things that you should be aware of. 95% of the people that joined my campaign were like me, never been involved in campaigning, never been involved in any, some of them even registered to vote for the first time. The majority of those people will never get involved in another campaign again because of the nightmares and horrors that we went through in what I call part B of the campaign, which is the first part of the campaign, which is the liaisons that we had with Mr. Jack Beeson and now Mr. Joseph Gallagher have been exceptional. These individuals have been the ones that have kept the other 5% interested in saying, you know, we could at least have people in there that really care for us and want to help us. But there's another side to this, which are the people that we don't see, which have to do, I guess, with the auditing, that for some reason they don't understand the basis of where we're at, that perhaps they should. For example, in my campaign, we really worked hard to get the leverages that we needed to be able to get campaign finance, for example, the 75 people in the district. And one of the things that I think the Campaign Finance Board needs to recognize is that to get $10 from a person in the South Bronx that has the highest unemployment rate in the city and one of the most poorest districts in the country, it's not like getting $10 from someone in, let's say, the Wall Street area or another area of New York City. So perhaps you guys need to revisit that and perhaps need to change that so people in areas that have high unemployment, low medium incomes, with the average income in the South Bronx is less than $22,000. then asking someone for $10 is a lot of money. It's not the same as asking someone in 57th Street or in Soho or whatever for that amount of money. And it made it very difficult for us. But notwithstanding that, we were able to get over 100 people to give us $10. But to our surprise, we would then receive a letter that we did not qualify in the 213 because they brought us down to less than 75. But the frustrating thing was that when we looked at the people that they brought us down with, they were all legitimate. These were people that actually gave us $10, but because of our conditions, again, the South Bronx, people don't have checks, people have cash, people don't relate in this type of situation where they know how to fill out certain forms. And we were surprised that so many of our people were knocked down. It was like a CSI group because they were saying that the signature on the card or on the form for the $10 donation or the $15 donation did not match the actual number. So if somebody wrote $10, they actually said to us that the $10 that they wrote, the 10, did not match the signature. I'm saying, well, how can they do that? I mean, you need an expert to try to tell me that that's not the same signature because of a number? That was ridiculous. In one case, they actually made phone calls to people who donated money to our campaign. One of them was a retired police officer. And she told me, Julio, I had to go and get affidavits, right? Because if these people did not qualify, they had to go back to these people, which kept us from campaigning. Because if now we have to spend these last few days and going after people who gave us a donation to knock on doors again, not to get a vote, but to just get a piece of paper signed saying that, yes, I gave you that money. But what was surprising to us was that when we knocked on some of these doors, like in this particular case with this retired police officer, she says, Julio, I'm surprised that you're here because I got a call from the Campaign Finance Board and they asked me, did you donate money to the Julio Pabon campaign? And she said, yes. She said, how much did you donate? She gave him the amount. So she says, for you to come here with an affidavit, it's like, what, they didn't believe you? So people actually thought that I was being targeted by the Campaign Finance Board. And they were somewhat concerned about that because they said, why are they going after you like that? And that caused a serious concern with a lot of my volunteers that realized that even though the Campaign Finance Board really intends to make this equal and fair for people like us who never get involved in campaigns, we had no support from no elected officials, no union support. We don't belong to a political party, but yet we made history. We were able to show that people like us can campaign, and we were able to show that we don't need to put in fraudulent signatures on the signatures that you need to run for office. We were able to bring them in on time. We qualified, but we did something nobody else in the city had done. We challenged the incumbent, and we proved that there is frauds committed, but not by the people who want to run, by the people who are in office. If those of you remember that period when you have Derek Jeter signing a petition, or Kate Moss signing a petition, or Tito Puente, who's dead, signing a petition. We were able to bring that out, and it showed, and thank God in yesterday's election, we were able to, in Tuesday's election, we were able to see so many young people now in the South Bronx running because they learned from the experience that we were able to provide in 213 and 216. So I want to thank the board for what you're doing in terms of allowing people like myself to run in situations that we have absolutely no support, no money, but to please consider what happens afterwards in terms of the auditing process, because that does turn people off. I mean, we did not get the same number of volunteers at the campaign in 213 and 216 special election. We were able to run again. I think that some lessons have been learned because to our great surprise when we received the letter from Campaign Finance Board saying that we basically met the guidelines and we had the penalties and everything was like balanced out. My wife and I looked at each other and we were doing an Irish tap dance because we couldn't believe that this was actually happening to us from the original nightmare. So I don't know if some of the lessons have been learned without testimony like this, but I just wanted to make sure that at least you get this side of it from the grassroots of some of the things that occurred that could help strengthen and make this a better process for everybody else in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and sharing those observations with us. By the way, just a factual follow-up. So what happened in 2013? Were you eventually found eligible for matching funds?
Yes, we were. We were able to bring up from the 68 that they brought us down to, we brought it back to 77. So we just barely made it. And that gave us some of the resources that we needed, at least to bring up some of the things. We didn't get the money in time to do some of the things that we really wanted to do, but we had enough money to be able to do some of the things that allowed us to at least get the message out. And the fact that for a candidate that never ran before, had no political support and no basis, the fact that we got over 33% of the vote showed people in the area that it can be done.
Also, I want to congratulate you on the zero penalty in the most recent election. Look, we understand that the law is complex and it isn't always easy to comply with. We think the CFB staff, as you have stated, and we appreciate the compliment, tries very hard to work with candidates to make sure that they do comply with the law. And those who watch, I don't know that anybody actually watches the videos of these hearings, but one who did might conclude from the hearings that there are a lot of penalties because the people who come to the hearings are usually the people who have penalties assessed against them. But of course, the majority of candidates do negotiate the system in a way without penalties, such as yourself the last time. But the comments that you've made about the need to be realistic and kind of user-friendly, we will take to heart. Obviously, there's a difference between the assistance function and the audit function, and audits are rarely pleasant affairs in any walk of life. But we will certainly take your comments to heart.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair. If I can just add one more comment as well. So we've heard a lot of, I've been on the board now for 10 years, and it's my 10th year on the board, and we've heard a lot of input from candidates over that period of time. And one of the things that we did do, and the Campaign Finance Board and staff should really be congratulated, is we did build something called NYC Votes, and it's really intended for folks who are primarily credit card contributors.
Yes.
And to make it much easier to comply and do all the things that you're talking about. But one thing that we haven't done is actually brought it down to the small dollar contributor. And I think one of the things that, I think I would challenge ourselves to think about is how we actually use technology to make it easier for your field staff to go out and actually use maybe an iPad or an iPhone to get all the right information from people and then have them sign it digitally on the phone or the iPad so that you don't actually have to go through this whole process over and over again. But maybe, so I think we all can think about that. And actually, if you have very specific suggestions along those lines, and talk to maybe some of your former staffers, what would make this easy? What would make it easier for us to comply? I know the Campaign Finance Board staff would love to hear some of those ideas, and maybe we can implement a new adaptation to that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you can definitely count on me and count on the people that, we feel that we did make a change. We didn't win, but there's many ways of winning. And one of the ways that we won was the fact that we were so happy to see so many young people actually take up the mantle and run in the Bronx on Tuesday. And we know that's a direct result of what we did because they all contacted us and they were asking us for advice. Like if we were the experts, and we say, well, we're not really the experts, but you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do this. And so that helps. So we're willing to help. And anytime you guys have my number, we can definitely sit down. We do have some, more specific recommendations that we can give.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
I think Joe had something.
Oh, I was just going to mention that both his 2013 and 2016 campaigns resulted in no penalties. It was both of the campaigns. Yeah,
it's amazing. Congratulations.
You're batting 1,000.
And in other circumstances,
I used to be bigger.
as we said in other circumstances, it's proof that even small campaigns can comply.
Yeah.
Okay, the final candidate appearance scheduled for this morning is Noah Gottbaum. Is Mr. Gottbaum here yet?
I received a call from him just before the meeting started, stuck on the subway. Of course.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to that. I had my worst subway ride ever this morning as well.
So I haven't seen him come in yet.
Why don't we do this? One sec.
Okay.
Why don't we move around the agenda a little bit, and I'm going to ask for a vote to go into executive session because we were going to do that anyway, and we'll also use that opportunity to deliberate on the okay. Well, we can. We're going to do both. We'll sort it out as to who should be present for which phase. We're going to both deliberate on the first two cases, and I'll ask for a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Moved. Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, the board is going to deliberate on two cases, go into executive session, and then come back in a little while.
Okay, so do you want to deliberate first?
Let's deliberate first. All right. We're back in open session, and we have one more item on the agenda, the appearance of candidate Noah Gottbaum. Mr. Gottbaum, if you'd have a seat over there, and the CFB staff at the other table. The way we proceed, Mr. Gottbaum, is the CFB staff will make a short introductory statement, and then I'll turn to you for your remarks.
Thank you, Chair Schaefer, members of the board, Executive Director Loprest, and Mr. Gottbaum. My name is Joseph Gallagher, Associate Counsel for the CFB, and the Senior Auditor on this campaign is Nalasia Mingo, who should be joining me soon. Before the board this morning is the matter of the Noah Gottbaum campaign in the 2013 election for City Council District 6. The campaign was a participant in the program and did receive public funds. CFB staff recommends that the board find the campaign committed the following 4 violations of the Act and board rules: filing a late disclosure statement, accepting contributions from corporations, limited liability companies, or partnerships, making impermissible post-election expenditures, and failing to respond to an inadequate response notice and a late response to the draft audit report. The campaign contests these violations and penalties.
Thank you. Mr. Gottbaum?
Thank you. To the board, first of all, my sincere apologies for being.
All right, we a number of us take the 2 and the 3.
Yeah, well, I took the 1, sat on that for a half hour, and then I took the 2 and was even longer on that.
I started on the 1 this morning. Apologies are unnecessary.
All right, well, thank you very, very much. And again, I do apologize, but it just seems to be happening. Anyway, thank you very much. And I just wanted to talk to the 4 penalties that have been recommended. The first one for filing a late disclosure statement, as we stated earlier, it came in, I think, about 15 minutes late because I had a new staffer, and he was in touch with our lawyer, tried to get it fixed, but we got it fixed about 15 minutes after the deadline. But that's what we can say. We definitely were late on that, and I do apologize. In terms of number 2, accepting contributions from corporations, limited liability companies, or partnerships. The first one was from my neighbor, Bunny Hoffinger, who mistakenly put in a check from her law firm. As soon as we didn't know about it, and our staff didn't know about it. And as soon as we found out, we immediately returned it. If a penalty has to be assessed, I understand that. The second one regarding American Technology Corporation.
Don't spend a lot of time on that one.
Okay, because I have an email from them saying that they never gave me any discounts, they never made any contributions. They just letting you know. I have an email from them subsequent where they just said we gave you exactly what we give other candidates, and it was not a contribution in any way, shape, or form.
Why don't I'll get that email from you after when we're finished.
If you want, I can read
statement.
it to you. It's pretty short.
No, just to make it just to be part of the record, Crystal can take it from you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to note, it's a new email that the staff
Yes.
hadn't seen.
No. I understand. Okay.
Yeah.
We
I
have
don't
the,
think we should spend a lot of time on
yeah.
this.
We have the email. And it will be made part of the record. I don't think you need to spend any more time on
Okay,
that.
I very much appreciate it. In terms of the post-election expenditures, my understanding was that fundraising costs associated with raising money post-election for debts or potential penalties were permissible. I did not know if I was going to incur penalties, but given all that was going on, I left those accounts open. It got to a point about 9 or 10 months afterward where it just seemed to be exorbitant, and so I closed them down. But I had them open solely for the purpose of raising funds to pay for any penalties or debt.
Let me focus on the word solely. Did you use those accounts for any other purpose whatsoever?
No, none. And I actually didn't even, end up using those accounts. And I just thought, this is, if I have to raise money, it'll be down the line, and I just can't countenance keeping these open. But I did keep them open originally because in anticipation of possibly needing to raise money for just this occasion.
You referenced penalties, but in terms of debts, it looks like, if I'm correct, that you have money left over in your account.
Yeah, so it would be for the penalties. But my understanding was that that costs incurred for potential fundraising for those penalties were permissible, but I got to a point where it just seemed like it was dragging on, and I didn't feel right about keeping that open. So hence I closed those down, but I would ask some dispensation on that because it seemed to be a permissible expense at the time.
Okay, you want to move on to the last?
The last one are quite personal, and I do apologize for not responding, and then the late response. The first point I told you I was in a bit of a family crisis. What I didn't say is that my fiancée had moved out, so I was all on my own with the kids, and my youngest son was hospitalized, and I frankly was just totally preoccupied with him and with my other two children, and I was just, it's no excuse not to have picked this up, but I just, at that point in time in my life, I was pretty overwhelmed.
What was the status of the treasurer at that point?
Treasurer was a friend of mine who kind of did it as a favor, and I didn't really feel comfortable asking him. He had helped out, but he had a business and a full-time job, and I tried to keep him, and I have tried to keep him, because he was helping me out as a favor, and I really didn't feel entirely comfortable getting him involved any more than he already was, which was, I think, to be potentially liable on anything that happened here. So I really wanted to kind of minimize. And he wasn't really involved on a day-to-day basis with the campaign in any way. And when, I didn't want to impose, if you will, and I was juggling quite a bit at that time, and I haven't gone into all of it for some personal reasons, but it was just extremely difficult and all encompassing, and it wasn't just that one child. I have two others. So, but again, I do apologize, and if there are any other questions, I can get you hospitalization records if you need, or anything like that, or any other sort of documentation, if that would be helpful. I just and I'm not trying to be evasive in any way, shape, or form. I'm just somewhat of a private person, and these were relatively public circumstances. So
I would just say for that, the failure to respond to the inadequate response notice and the late response to the draft audit report, the campaign was in contact with the staff. So it wasn't just like we stopped hearing from them. He exhausted the amount of extension requests that audit routinely grants to campaigns. And at that point is when it became a late response to the draft audit report. So some campaigns you'll see, they just won't respond at all and you never hear from them. But Mr. Gottbaum was in communication with staff throughout that time. And then in the earlier it is permissible for them to keep them open if they do continue to fundraise. But in this case, there was no evidence of fundraising in the amount of time that those accounts were kept open. And that's why a penalty was recommended.
Is the 2-month period a practice or is it in regulation?
Malaysia? Practice? Yeah, I think it's a practice. It's not in our rules. Is that correct? Yeah.
Anything else from the board? Okay, well, thank you very
yeah,
much.
I didn't mention the later point in time when I was caring not just for my children but also for my mother, who subsequently passed away. But that in 2015-16, when I was in close contact with the Campaign Finance Board, I was juggling both sides of my family at that point in time. And again, I do apologize. I think we've responded and cleaned everything up.
Oh, yes. Since that time, Mr. Gottbaum worked to reduce his penalties by a large amount down to where they are today.
Anyway, I do appreciate.
Thank you for coming in, and
Thanks.
hope your son is okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we will go back into deliberations.
which is understandable.
All right, we're back in open session for the final item on our agenda, which is to vote on the recommended findings and penalties and public funds repayments. The first candidate was Joseph Borelli, and the following are the recommended violations and penalties: failing to timely return over the limit, doing business contributions, and our proposed penalty is $300. Next, accepting contributions from corporations, limited liability companies, or partnerships. The proposed penalty is $225. And finally, accepting contributions from an unregistered political committee. The proposed penalty is $125 for total penalties of $650. I'll move the approval of those findings and penalties. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. The next candidate was Julio Pabon. There is a recommended public funds repayment, which was not contested, of $5,339.03. I'll move the approval of that public funds repayment. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Finally, the candidate was Noah Gottbaum, and these are the board's proposed findings and penalties. Filing a late disclosure statement, the board is proposing a penalty of $50. Next, accepting contributions from corporations, limited liability companies, or partnerships, the board is proposing a penalty of $125. Next, making impermissible post-election expenditures, the board is proposing a penalty of $450. And finally, failing to respond to an inadequate response notice and late response to the draft audit report, the board is proposing a penalty of $2,000. That would therefore be total penalties of $2,625, as well as recommended public funds repayment of $7,014.64, totaling an aggregate repayment of $9,639.64. I'll move the approval of those findings and proposed penalties and repayments. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, we've given these numbers for the final bank balance. If there's a slight adjustment, I think it should be clear that the contemplation of the board is whatever the final bank balance is. If there's been an added fee from the bank that makes it a little less, it's whatever the final bank balance
That's the standard practice, is
Which is the
that
standard
when
practice.
if the campaign returns with another bank, because obviously bank fees accrue, in the time between the notice and the board meeting.
Thank you for that clarification. I'll now move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The board is now adjourned. Thank you very much.